This week we have catchers and shortstops, and yeah, we're going to be starting with the catchers. And yeah, before we get into all of it, we kind of reference a lot of underlying numbers when talking about projections for 2024. These are all, what we think they're going to do in 2024. So we use a lot of underlying numbers like strikeout rate, walk rate, batted ball numbers in terms of average exit velocity, barrel rate, fly ball rate, line drive rate, sweet spot rate. And that's just because it's a better projector of future success as opposed to maybe their actual results. Maybe they got a little bit lucky on ground balls or something like that. So that's why we use a lot of underlying numbers. And also all these positions are based on what the Fangraphs roster resource has them projected as. I don't think that was necessarily much of a problem this time around, because catcher and shortstop is fairly set in stone. But yeah, so yeah, that's all I have to preface here. So who is your number 10 catcher in baseball for 2024?
Yeah, I'm going to start this out with what might be considered a hot take. I'd be very surprised to see if you also have this guy on your list, Chris. But my number 10 catcher, a guy that I'm pretty high on coming into 2024, is Jake Rogers from the Detroit Tigers. Jake Rogers, I think, had a really interesting season last year. And I'm interested to see if he can build on that in what would potentially be his first full season in the majors. So, just to give you an idea, the thing that stood out to me the most, 26.3% of Jake Rogers' batted balls, his 285 batted balls last year, were hard hit and in the sweet spot. That was the fourth highest rate in baseball, minimum 200 batted balls, trailing only Aaron Judge, JD Martinez, and Yordan Alvarez, and just ahead of Kyle Schwarber, Shohei Ohtani, and Bryce Harper. So those are like six elite hitters with Jake Rogers sandwiched right in the middle. Not to mention, he played excellent defense last year. He had, I believe, 10.5 defensive runs above average on Fangraphs, which, albeit the catcher position is a lot easier than some other positions to accumulate defensive runs above average, but 10.4 is very good. That's probably elite, especially for someone that only had 365 plate appearances last year. Not to mention, his blocking and his framing on Statcast were also both excellent. He's a guy that hits the ball very hard. He's a guy that lifts the ball a lot. He had a pretty good fly ball or line drive rate of 24.1%, a good fly ball rate of 32.4%. Obviously, Detroit is not the most ideal ballpark to do that in, but you know what? He's been making it work, and I feel like there could be a lot of upside in a full season of Jake Rogers. So I have him in my number 10.
Yeah, that is definitely a hot take. Yeah, I was not really considering him. I don't think MLB Network had him in their top 10. So yeah,
That's fine.
it is definitely a yeah, the Shredder, that's no diss to you. The Shredder has been doing some interesting things as of late. But
Yeah, I'm fine with being like the lone Jake Rogers guy right now because I get it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll be the first to the party, which is something to say.
Hmm.
So yeah, my number 10 had an excellent offensive year, and based on his offense, you could rank him potentially higher. But also, he's a newer guy to the league, and I'm talking about Astros catcher Yainer Diaz. He slugged 538 with an 846 OPS last year. And out of 24 primary catchers with 350 plus plate appearances last year, his slugging and OPS ranked first. He was basically, yeah, plate appearance for plate appearance, pretty much the best offensive catcher in baseball last year, which is pretty crazy to say. And he also was in line with his expected numbers. He was 92nd percentile in expected batting average and 96th percentile in expected slugging. Along with that, he was a pretty neutral defender. And yeah, if he's someone who can do this on a consistent basis and be an everyday catcher for the Astros while putting up those offensive numbers, he's going to rise among these ranks. I think the only reason why I don't have him up higher is I need to kind of see him do it again, and continue to do this. But I mean, pretty amazing season, and definitely, for me, he earned that top 10 status just based on what he was able to do offensively while being a pretty neutral defender as a backstop for the Astros. So yeah, Yainer Diaz is my number 10. Who do you have as your number 9?
My number 9, this might also be considered a hot take. On the opposite side of the spectrum, someone you'd think wouldn't be on the list to someone that might be higher. And I feel like you probably view this guy the same, but in any other year other than this one, I think this guy would be a top tier catcher. I'm talking about JT Realmuto. He regressed pretty heavily throughout the 2023 season. Just on defensive runs above average alone, he was a negative after being plus 18 and plus 16 in 2021 and 2022, respectively. The first time he's been a negative defensive runs above average catcher since 2016. So a lot of defensive regression happened there. Not to mention, he also set a career high, or excuse me, well, yeah, basically a career high in strikeout rate. He did strike out more in his 11 games played in 2014, but in a full season, his highest career strikeout rate. Also, his lowest career walk rate in any season since 2017. Struck out 25.6% of the time, walked only 6.5% of the time. So that was an issue. He also kind of just started popping the ball up out of nowhere. He set a career high in pop up rate at 9.3% this year. Um, there are a lot of things that I'm very concerned about with JT Realmuto. He's going into his age 33 season right now, and his framing, most particularly, is what's been alarming because in 2021, he was an 85th percentile framer on Statcast, and then he went to 50th percentile in 2022, and then second percentile with negative 13 framing runs in 2023, which is certainly not what you want to see. And oh, by the way, Fangraphs agrees. He had plus 8.6 framing runs in 2021, 1.1 framing run in 2022, negative 12.2 in 2023. So no matter where you look, it was a massive defensive regression from JT Realmuto. He was a borderline above average offensive player, which is also a bit of regression for him. And I don't know. I'm very concerned about what the last season might be telling about JJ Realmuto's future.
Yeah, that was extremely odd from Real Muto last year. Like
Hmm.
there's it some of it seems sort of anomalous, but there are some worrisome trends. And yeah, it's definitely it's weird to evaluate JT Real Muto this year considering how awesome he was in 2022 and even a little bit before that, and how, disappointing his 2023 was. So it's weird to balance like, well, actually, how good is this guy? How is he bouncing back? Is he not? It's a very weird thing. So now on to my number 9, uh, who is kind of the opposite of Yainer Diaz. He's, all defense, not a lot of offense. I'm talking about Patrick Bailey, who hit your all MLB underrated team last year. So Patrick Bailey led all catchers in fielding run value and defensive runs above average last year. And he was second among all fielders in fielding run value, and he was first among all fielders in defensive runs above average in 2023. So, the most defensively valuable player in baseball last year. Offensively, kind of struggled on the surface at least. He had a 644 OPS, but underperformed his expected slugging by 61 points. So you think that you'd think that maybe things can balance out a little bit. And he underperformed his expected slugging on fly balls by 345 points. And I know that some of that is sort of natural when you're playing at Oracle Park, where there's a lot of deep parts of that ballpark. However, I think that might balance out a little bit, and Patrick Bailey can be a guy who could get a 700 OPS this year while being possibly the best fielder in baseball, which would put him in the top 10 for me. So yeah, that's Patrick Bailey at number 9. Who do you have for your number 8?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it there. Patrick Bailey was on my all underrated team, and I have him at number 8. I mean, yeah, you pretty much said everything that I was planning on saying. Um, there are certainly improvements to be made offensively, but not only did he lead everyone in fielding runs and in defensive runs above average, but he did it in 97 games at the total. If we just imagine what that would look like in a full season, like we're talking Yadier Molina peak numbers, if he can do that. And yeah, he underperformed his expected numbers by quite a bit. He had an expected slugging of 420 and he slugged 359. Right? If that balances out, he's probably a league average hitter. And if he continues at, that defensive pace while being a league average hitter, that's like a 5.5 to 6 win season over the course of like 130 games played as a catcher. And he needs to strike out less and walk more. I would love to see that, but yeah, I mean, he is an absolutely gifted fielder. Blocking could be a little better, but he is a plus 16 in framing runs, a 1.87 pop time. Each of those are elite, and also six caught stealing above average runs, also 98th percentile. There are so many things that Patrick Bailey just not excelled wouldn't even be the right word, just completely lapped the field in last year at the catcher position defensively. Um, and he had, on a rate basis, is one of the best defensive catcher seasons we've seen since any sort of defense started being tracked. Going back maybe to 2008 when framing runs started being tracked on Fangraphs. And yeah, 2.8 wins above replacement in 97 games with a 78 weighted runs created plus. That's not normal. That does not happen. So yeah, I mean, if he can be a league average hitter and keep up that defensive pace, we're looking at a guy that's going to be probably like top 20 at the very least in the league in F4 among position players. So yeah, I have Patrick Bailey at my number 8, and that might even be an understatement come year's end.
Yeah, for sure. And also to add to his case, he was also a fairly neutral base runner as a catcher, which is pretty rare. Usually that's an automatic negative. Although he was negative, he was negative 0.7, which is basically neutral. And then along with that, he's also only heading into his age 25 season. That was his rookie year. So he's due to develop a little bit more. So now on to my number 8, who is one of the better offensive players at this position. Talking about Wilson Contreras of the St. Louis Cardinals. He has a 125 OPS plus over the last 2 years, and out of 24 catchers with 600 plus plate appearances in the last 2 years, his OPS ranks second. His defense is fairly neutral. It seems, I think he might have had like -3 fielding run values or something last year, maybe -2. And it's nothing too egregious. So him having that along with great offense is a very good combination. The most alarming thing about last year, and maybe why I don't have him higher, is he ran zero point 0.9 less feet per second than he did in 2022, which is a sign of slower speed. And he had a 15% extra base taken rate, which was 23 percentage points less than the year before. So it seems like he's going to be very negative on the bases, albeit his offense is pretty awesome for a catcher and his defense is fairly neutral. So I have him at number 8. What is your number 7?
At number 7, I have another kind of sneaky pick, maybe. I don't know if this is really considered sneaky because this is a name that pretty much most baseball fans know. But I'm more just predicting a breakout for him next year. I'm talking about Francisco Alvarez of the New York Mets. There are a lot of things that he did well last year. There are a lot of things that he didn't do so well. I mean, first of all, he's an elite framer already, +9 framing runs, very good defensive runs above average last year, 17.9 in only 123 games and 423 plate appearances. Obviously, like the upside of his offensive game has been very clear for many years now. He was a top prospect in baseball coming up. And he lifts the ball a lot. 31.9% fly ball rate, only a 15% line drive rate, and an 8.4% pop up rate, which obviously you would like to be lower. I think the only thing with him is he does hit a lot of balls straight away. For a guy that hits the ball in the air a lot, you don't want to hit as many balls straight away because they're going to result in more flyouts. Naturally, that's it's not part of the reason he has a third percentile expected batting average. That's probably because he strikes out quite a bit. But we've known that the upside has been there for Francisco Alvarez for a while, and for what was considered, not a great year for him in terms of batted ball profile, he still tuned out a almost league average 97 weighted runs created plus. So I think like a 120 to 130 is in there for this year, plus all that defensive value that he adds to the Mets. I think he's going to be a star catcher. I think he's going to be kind of what he was expected to be, and I think we could see it this year.
Yeah, for sure. He made his impact last year, and he was a number one prospect coming up. And we saw him on the Rumble Pony. Shout out to
Yes, we
Binghamton.
did.
Um, so
Shout out to Binghamton.
So yeah, yes, for sure. So this is where my number 7 comes in. I'm going with JT Realmuto here, who you put at 9. Yeah, things were extremely weird with JT Realmuto last year. From 2022 to 2023, his fielding run value went from 13 to -9. His extra base taken rate went from 54% to 30%. BSR went from plus 6.6 to -1.5. His OPS plus went from 130 to 106. All of those were at least 8-year lows, which is just incredibly weird. It seems very, very random. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know if it's a trend or like with a lot of these guys, I don't know if that's a trend or if that is just an outline season. So I would imagine some of those are outliers, or I imagine at least some of those numbers are going to balance out. And that's why I think he will be, still a top 7 catcher. But yeah, there are some things that are definitely alarming, with the extra base taken rate being as low as it was, the BSR being as low as it was, and also hitting. He was worse at hitting last year. And all these numbers were at least 8-year lows. So yeah, that's what dragged him down. I think last year he was a consensus top 2 catcher, so it's weird to have him down so low on our list this year. But that's how fast things sort of tapered off for him last year, and there's some new blood at the position as well, which came up above him. So yeah, we'll see about JT Realmuto this year. Was last year sort of a trend, or was it just a weird season? Who is your number 6?
At number 6, this might be another hot take. You're probably gonna have this guy at higher than 6, and that's totally fine. But I put Will Smith at 6, of the Dodgers. He is coming off a career low in weighted runs created plus at only 119. I think his biggest asset has always been his offense. He was kind of recognized as the best offensive catcher in baseball for a while. I don't know if he still holds that title with a 119 weighted runs created plus last year, and he still did a lot of things very well. I mean, a 119 is still very good. He had his best base running season. He had a strong defensive season on Fangraphs, but not quite on Baseball Savant. He was good at blocking and he was good at pop time, but his framing regressed this year to a -3. And in fact, he's also kind of always struggled with framing since he's come up. And that's a lot of the reason. But his batted ball profile also kind of went down a bit in the last year. He dropped some in exit velocity. He did have a decent sweet spot rate, but his expected numbers did take a bit of a dip. 473 and 472 expected slugging respectively in 2022 and 21. Only a 435 this year. He went down about 40 points in expected slugging. And his defense has been, all right. I mean, by like elite catcher standards, I would say. But there are definitely some better defensive guys out there, and I don't know if his offense has had the appeal that it used to have. So I put Will Smith at 6 for that reason.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Will Smith is an interesting conversation because he made such an impression at such a young age, and we were talking about when is he going to be, it's going to be a matter of when, not if, when he's going to be like the best catcher in baseball. And we've actually seen his performance regress a little bit, although he still has time to get
He
back to
absolutely
that
does.
status.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been weird. And some catchers have sort of jumped him on this list. So my number 6 is Jonah Heim, who is coming off a career year with the Rangers. So with Jonah Heim, among all fielders in the last 2 seasons, he is 4th in defensive runs above average. That led him to winning the Gold Glove last year. And what's impressive about Heim is he's made some just incremental, or maybe even not so incremental, progression offensively in like pretty much every category since 2021, which is why you kind of have to be high on the guy. he has improved his average on base percentage, slugging percentage, barrel rate, and expected WOBA each year since 2021. And along with that, he was an above average hitter last year while being fairly neutral on the bases, along with, being a Gold Glove defender. So that definitely has a tremendous value. And along with that, with his offense, what you can be optimistic about, and how you can expect him to maybe outperform his expected numbers is, out of 204 hitters with 500 plus batted balls in the last 2 seasons, Jonah Heim has the ninth highest pulled fly ball rate, the ninth highest rate of batted balls that are pulled fly balls. So yeah, that leads to maybe a little bit higher of a home run to fly ball ratio, which is nice, adding to that offensive production, which was already above average last year. So yeah, Jonah Heim made a really good impression, had a real hot start to the year last year, cooled off a little bit, but nonetheless was an above average hitter and won the Gold Glove while being neutral on the bases. So yeah, very good year from Jonah Heim. I imagine you have him a little bit higher, so you'll definitely get into him as well. So yeah, and now your number 5.
Yeah, so for number 5, I put a guy that I actually William Contreras from the Milwaukee Brewers. A lot of why I have him so high was the incredible progression he made defensively in his first full season. It was his first year of his career playing more than 100 games, and he played 141. And he went from being a negative defender on Fangraphs to being a plus 18 defensive runs above average defensive catcher, which was just a remarkable turnaround for him. In terms of framing, he went from the 20th percentile in 2022 to the 93rd percentile in 2023. In terms of blocking, he went from the 22nd percentile to the 90th percentile. So just a truly remarkable turnaround of catching for William Contreras defensively. The only reason I don't have him higher, given that sort of defensive value plus a 124 weighted runs created plus, is his batted ball profile. I think there are some concerns when you look at the fact that he had a 55% ground ball rate last year. You definitely want. I don't think there's any scenario where you want a guy to have a 55% ground ball rate, especially a guy that has a 91.3% or 91.3 mile per hour exit velocity and a 48.4% hard hit rate. So I'd need to see William Contreras lift the ball a little bit more. He only had a 20% fly ball rate last year and a 19.9% line drive rate. I would like to see both of those go up at least 5% in the next year. And I think I could put him a lot higher on this list if he does those things. And honestly, just to sum it up, a 26.9% sweet spot rate, second percentile in the league. All his expected numbers were pretty far below what he actually did produce because of that. The one good thing he did, given this batted ball profile, was hit a lot of balls up the middle. Obviously, ground balls up the middle have a lot higher chance of being hits now, and they did in 2023. So that probably helped a lot with his expected numbers and his actual numbers. But I still would like to see him lift the ball a little more and ground out a little less.
Right. So yeah, my number 5 that's where I put Will Smith, different Will, but yeah, I have Will Smith number 5 here. So yeah, he's interesting because, like I said, after like 2020 when he had a great shortened season, and especially after 2021 when he had a very good full season, we were like, okay, this guy, he's really emerging. He's going to be one of the best catchers in baseball. And he's still, in my mind, a top 5 catcher, in your mind, a top 6 catcher. But it's not what we would have expected, a couple years ago. And that's largely because his offense has very slightly tapered off each of the last 2 seasons. Since 2021, his OPS plus has gone from 127 to 124 to 114, and his slugging has gone from 495 to 465 to 438. So yeah, and his home run total has gone from 25 to 24 to 19, all in a pretty similar ballpark of plate appearances. So it's not necessarily a playing time thing. And along with his offense slightly tapering off, his defense has stayed fairly neutral. So nothing to put against him, but also nothing to add to his case either. So yeah, a 119 OPS plus over the last 2 years with fairly neutral defense. Like, he's been pretty good, and that's why still have him as number 5. But yeah, it's he's definitely gone down the list over the past couple years. Who do you have as your number 4?
Number 4, I have Jonah Heim. And I think Jonah Heim is kind of how I talk about my hypothetical dream scenario for a guy like Patrick Bailey. Bailey actually had a higher defensive runs above average last year than Jonah Heim, despite about 40 less games played. But Jonah Heim has been a league average hitter, or right around a league average hitter, for the last couple of years now. Yeah, 96 weighted runs created plus in 2022, 103 in 2023, and his expected numbers are kind of right with his actual numbers. His expected batting average was only 3 points lower than his actual. His expected slugging was 4 points lower than his actual. And not to mention, he doesn't strike out a whole lot. He walks a decent amount, a little below the league average at 8%, but uh, for a catcher, I mean, you take that any single day. Yeah, and not to mention, he's been maybe the best defensive catcher in baseball over the last 3 seasons. Uh, almost, yeah, over 50 defensive runs above average over a 3-year span is pretty ridiculous. And he's been a league average hitter to go along with it. And I mean, I think he's becoming one of the most consistent guys in the league, you could almost say. I mean, defensively, he's certainly already there. But offensively, he pulls the ball a lot. He lifts the ball a lot. And if you do those things, you'll find your way into a lot of hits, no matter what your expected numbers say. So I put Jonah Heim at number 4. I mean, I think he's becoming a lot more consistent with it. And yeah, I mean, he's a very safe pick to accumulate a lot in every year now.
Yeah, for sure. And something that I really liked about him is that he's just made incremental offensive improvements to his game each of the last 2 years, which is very nice. So my number 4, this is where I have William Contreras, Wilson's brother, and your number 5 catcher. Yeah, William Contreras, very interesting player considering, the all the variance that's going on here, like a randomly great defensive season, randomly high actual numbers over expected numbers. But just to break down William Contreras, over the last 2 years, he has a 130 OPS plus, and out of 24 catchers with 600 plus plate appearances in the last 2 years, he leads in OPS. Also from 2022 to 2023, his fielding run value went from -7 to +8. Shout out to Foolish Bailey. He has a little video dedicated to the quote unquote Brewers catching lab, where he talked about how the same thing pretty much happened to Omar Narvaez when he came to Milwaukee. So maybe there's an actual thing there. Maybe we can actually rely on those numbers for William Contreras. Along with that, William Contreras led all catchers in FWAR last year. And for me, why I don't have him higher is I'm just kind of waiting to make sure that defensive season is not an outlier, because single year defensive numbers can sometimes be a little bit wishy-washy, as we've mentioned before on these other positional rankings. So I'm just trying to make sure that he is an actual good defender and not just had a random very good season. Along with that, he's also, as you mentioned, he's also due to regress offensively. He has hit 302 on ground balls the last 2 years, which is very odd from a catcher because he doesn't have the speed to outrun for infield singles. And him hitting 302 on grounders has led to him having the 4th luckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average out of 110, and also the 4th luckiest difference batting average and expected batting average on ground balls out of 204. So he's been 4th luckiest in both. So he's due to regress a little bit. If he had a 130 OPS plus over the last 2 seasons and wasn't outperforming his expected numbers, I probably would have him a little bit higher. But I think that OPS plus number is due to regress a little bit. So yeah, that is my number 4. Who do you have as your number 3?
Feel like we're gonna have the same top 3 in order. At number 3, I have a guy that you drafted in the F4 League last year, which proved to be a winning move for Team Chris. I have Cal Raleigh as my number 3 catcher. First of all, Cal Raleigh just absolutely refuses to put the ball on the ground or hit it anywhere other than right field because he had a 50.8% pull rate last year, a 35.1% ground or fly ball rate, and only a 31.7% ground ball rate. Having a fly ball rate that's almost 4% above your ground ball rate is kind of unheard of, to be completely honest. And Cal Raleigh did it last year. He also did it to an even crazier extent in 2022, a 41.5% fly ball rate to a 29.6% ground ball rate. I just love that he refuses to hit the ball on the ground. Just to give you an idea, he had the second highest pulled fly ball rate in baseball, minimum 300 batted balls in 2023, behind only Max Muncy, right in front of Isaac Paredes. Isaac Paredes has made his entire game about pulled fly balls, and Cal Raleigh actually does it at a higher rate. And not to mention, he's also an elite defensive catcher by any standard that you can pretty much look at. On Fangraphs, he has 82nd percentile framing. He has 87th percentile caught stealing above average. So he's good at throwing guys out. He's good at stealing strikes, as Foolish Baseball would put it. He could be better at blocking, and that's all right. But I mean, on Fangraphs, they also love him there. 20.7 defensive runs above average last year, 18 in 2022. Yeah, Cal Raleigh has been, an automatic 4-win catcher for over the last couple of years now. Even with a high strikeout rate, and even with low batting averages, with below league average on base percentages, he's turned out an above average offensive season with elite defense every year.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, drafted him in F4. And the fun thing about drafting a very defensive oriented player is they could go 0 for 4 and there's like no change in their F4 the next day, which is
Yep.
pretty fun. Whereas if you're drafting, if you have like Pete Alonso in your lineup or Yandy Diaz, if they're 0 for 4, it's a rough
It's
day
an
for them,
automatic go down no matter what.
no matter what. But that's an aside. With Cal Raleigh, yeah, I have number 3 as well. And yeah, for many of the reasons you're talking about, he has a 116 OPS plus, the second most defensive runs above average, and third most F4 among catchers over the last 2 seasons. He also has the highest pulled fly ball rate the last 2 seasons out of 204 hitters. That's the highest rate of batted balls of which are pulled fly balls, and he also has the 5th highest rate of fly balls that were pulled out of 153. So due to outperform expected numbers a little bit because he pulls so many fly balls, hits a lot of fly balls to shorter areas of the ballpark. So yeah, and that's led to him hitting a lot of home runs. He hit 30 home runs last year, 27 the year before, while being an elite defender, definitely a Gold Glove candidate each of the past 2 years. So yeah, I mean, his high offense production for the position, along with great defense, definitely puts him top 3 for me, as well as you. So now on to the number 2 catcher in baseball for 2024.
So at number 2, I think a lot of people are going to have this guy number 1, although I don't think you're going to. But I did put Adley Rutschman as my number 2 catcher. The only reason I didn't put him number 1 was because there was a slight regression last year, both in defense and in base running. Otherwise, I would have probably easily put him number 1, but he did a little worse in both of those things in a larger sample size last year. But I mean, let's talk about what he did extremely well, right? He has a really, really good batted ball profile for someone of I guess his hitting caliber. He doesn't hit the ball super hard, but he places it very well. He has a 37% sweet spot rate. With that result, because of that, he had a 95th percentile expected batting average at 292, a 469 expected slugging, which was about 35 points above his actual number. He doesn't strike out. He doesn't chase. He doesn't whiff. And he walks a lot, 13.4%. He almost walked as much as he struck out last year. And, he may have regressed on defense, but he's still very good at it. He was above average in every StatCast defensive catcher metric that there is. He was above average on every Fangraphs defensive catcher metric that there is. He is still an elite defensive catcher, even if he did it a little bit better in 2022. And there certainly is the potential for him to put it all together next year, and I'm very excited to see if he can do that. Uh, but he's going into his second full season now. You could really even say his third full season because 2022, he had 470 plate appearances. He was very close to the qualifier. But I mean, Adley Rutschman has been everything that the Orioles had hoped he would be when they drafted him in 2019, when they called him up in 2022, everything in between that, and I have him as the number two catcher.
Yeah, it seems like Adley Rutschman's progression has been completely linear, which is very rare. Like it seemed like he was the number one draft pick. He was probably like ranked top 10, then eventually ranked top two, then eventually ranked the best prospect in baseball, then came up and was second in rookie of the year. Maybe would have won it if he started the season with the Orioles. He just hasn't missed a beat at all, which is very, very cool. Yeah, my number two is actually Shawn Murphy.
Wow, you're like the Shawn Murphy guy, though.
I was in the all MLB underrated team. However, I think part of what changed this might have been when we recorded that. After we recorded that, I think Rutschman went on a great run, and
And
Shawn
Sean Murphy
Murphy
went to a huge slump.
went into a very bad slump. I think his last 17 games, he had a sub 500 OPS or something like that. Um, but also, I think there's just a little bit more reflection to be done. Um, and also, this is a projection of 2024. And I think Adley Rutschman can make some more, he has a higher ceiling, which kind of gives me his number one status. Not to spoil it. I don't.
Yeah, I thought you were good. I thought you were good. I thought that's where you had Francisco Alvarez or Jake
Yeah,
Rogers.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd Connor Wong up there. I really appreciated
Hmm.
the interview that we had. But Shawn Murphy, number two, still, yeah, awesome catcher. Over the last 2 years, he has a 123 OPS plus, the third most defensive runs above average, and the second most FWAR among catchers over the last two seasons. He underperformed his expected numbers, but I think part of that had to do with where he was hitting his fly balls. He only pulled 23% of his fly balls last year and sent 44% of them straight away, which was the sixth highest rate out of 153. The league has slugged 1724 on pulled fly balls in the last 2 years and 569 on straightaway fly balls. So he that has led to him having worse results on the fly balls. So with Shawn Murphy, why I think I have him below Adley Rutschman is just because Adley Rutschman actually does have more FWAR over the last 2 years, and also Adley Rutschman is younger, and I think has a little bit of a higher ceiling. And I think some of those either base running or defensive regressions could have been potential outliers. So he might be growing his game a little bit further. So, but what is your case for Shawn Murphy as the best catcher in baseball for 2024?
Yeah. I think on a rate basis, I really liked Sean Murphy's 2023 a lot more than Adley Rutschman's. Um, Sean Murphy had almost 250 less plate appearances. He had 438 compared to Rutschman's 687. He only lost to him in F4 by point 0.9. He slightly edged him out in weighted runs created plus 129 to 127. Every expected metric was pretty awesome, and I know that the reason you obviously explained the reason why he didn't perform up to his expected numbers was because he hit a lot of balls straight away, and the expected numbers don't account for that. But there is something to be said, I think, about a 525 expected slugging from the catcher position, a 15% barrel rate from the catcher position. I mean, Sean Murphy hits the ball hard. He hits it in the sweet spot 36.3% of the time. He walks a lot, and he is the best blocker in baseball. He was last year, 15 blocking runs above average. He was 84th percentile or higher in every StatCast defensive metric. He had double the amount of defensive runs above average compared to Adley Rutschman, despite much less time behind the plate. And I think Sean Murphy has a great chance of doing that again next year. I think obviously you mentioned the improvement that needs to be made was the spraying of his fly balls a little more to left field rather than center. But I think there last year at least there was a pretty drastic difference between the two of them in fielding, and I think offensively they were kind of very similar. So the defensive edge really put Murphy above and beyond for me. But I mean, yeah, there is an easy case to be made for either one as the number one catcher.
Yeah, right. And also, we mentioned Shawn Murphy's expected numbers. He also led catchers in OPS out of among catchers with 600 plus plate appearances, or not 600 plus, 400 plus plate appearances last year. Shawn Murphy had the highest OPS. So it's not just that we're relying on expected numbers. He does have quite the pedigree in the on the surface numbers as well. So yeah, Adley Rutschman. I have Adley Rutschman number one. And maybe those F4 numbers are skewed a little bit by him just playing more than Shawn Murphy did last year, but I think that also has its own value in it as well. But Adley Rutschman over the last 2 years has a 129 OPS plus and the most F4 among catchers over the last 2 seasons. Out of 24 catchers with 600 plus plate appearances in the last few years, he is third in OPS plus, or third in OPS, second in walk to strikeout ratio, and leads in on-base percentage and weighted runs created plus. And he's also fourth in BSR because of his 49% extra base taken rate over the last 2 seasons. He also leads catchers. He also leads all catchers over the last 2 years in both hits and walks. So that's where that on-base percentage definitely comes in. Also last year, he was 90th percentile or higher in strikeout rate, walk rate, whiff rate, expected batting average, and expected WOBA. And he also has a plus 17 fielding run value over the last 2 years. So yeah, and he is heading into his age 26 season, I believe, maybe 27, but still a pretty young player who has very good underlying numbers with himself, just great strikeout to walk numbers. I think fairly average like exit velocity numbers, but this with how often he's putting the ball in play, he's due to have very good offensive results, which he has had, a 129 OPS plus over the last 2 seasons, along with very positive base running and defense. So yeah, that's my case for Adley Rutschman as the best catcher for 2024. This might be only like the second time we've had a different number one. Because
Let me go through the lists in my head.
Because yeah, it's been Corbin Carroll for left field, Aaron Judge for center field, Ronald Acuna Jr. for right field. We had different starting pitchers, which is due to happen.
You had Strider and I had Wheeler.
I had Fried and you had
Fried, you had Fried and I had Wheeler. Yeah.
And then third base was Jose Ramirez. We both had, and first base was Freddie Freeman. So only the second time we have a different number one. Not bad, but I think a lot of these are pretty consensus, especially like first base, center field, like that's definitely the case. So all right, so now on to
we gotta review our lists.
Yeah, our 10 through 1, because yeah, we definitely had some discrepancies. I had some guys on my list that you didn't have. You had some.
Yeah, I will say Yainer Diaz was my 11. Wilson Contreras was probably my 12 as well.
Right.
Jake Rogers was like your 23.
I don't know. I just list out my 10 and
yeah,
I think I don't really rank after that. I'm like, oh, this guy was in consideration, but I don't know. So yeah, my number 10 was let me get back to my list here. Or yeah, 10 through 1. My number 10 was Yainer Diaz. Number 9, Patrick Bailey. 8, Wilson Contreras. 7, JT Realmuto. 6, Jonah Heim. 5, Will Smith. 4, William Contreras. 3, Cal Raleigh. 2, Shawn Murphy. 1, Adley Rutschman. What is your 10 through 1?
Yeah, so at number 10, I put Jake Rogers. At number 9, JT Realmuto. Number 8, Patrick Bailey. Number 7, Francisco Alvarez. Number 6, Will Smith. Number 5, William Contreras. Number 4, Jonah Heim. Number 3, Cal Raleigh. Number 2, Adley Rutschman. And number 1, I had Shawn Murphy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, now we will get on to the captains of the infield.